Hey guys, this is Seth here with a very, I don't know if I would consider it an important video because it's less so about delivering news and more so just about discussing something that's related to some news that just came out, but in any case, I'm sure a lot of you have heard by now, but yeah, Archie Sonic's dead. Uh, that's about the best way I can, that's about the best way to put it, to be honest, because that's essentially what Sega has told us. The they are no longer going to be working with Archie Comics for the Sonic series. They didn't absolutely say that it was canceled, like Sonic being in comics. So clearly, they're going to bring back Sonic in comic form in some way. We just don't know what that will entail exactly. Which basically sums up this entire past year for Sonic comics. Essentially, is we end up with more questions than answers than anything. Um, but the one big question that we really did not know really for most of this year was what was going on with the Archie Sonic comics, because there hasn't been any news for it for 6, 7 months, and only today in the past few hours, we actually found out. Um, by the way, I'm still kind of looking back and forth online because the news still just broke a few hours ago, so I'm still kind of paying paying attention to anything important. Um, it really stinks because this this these comics have gone for 24 years, and this is how they're ending. Just in case you're not familiar with the situation, I'd be surprised if you weren't, but if just in case you weren't, to kind of go through what has happened in the past 6 months. Uh, Long story short, about 6, 7 months ago, it turned out that the Sonic comics went on hiatus, and they started postponing the releases of upcoming Sonic comics, including the 300th issue of the main series. Which, oh my God, why did that not get to 300? That would, even if the arc hadn't have been finished, at the very least they could have gotten to issue 300 and ended it there. That would have been a perfect issue number to end it at, and they, but nevertheless, they had upcoming issues. Solicitations had been out. We already knew like a fraction of the comics because they do release like 3 or 4 pages of the comics and the covers, so we knew a portion of them. We knew they were just about finished, if they weren't already finished. Um, and we knew that they had been in a hiatus before. This isn't the first time. By the way, I just ate, so if I'm pausing, it's me still kind of in my post-eating state. But anyway, uh, they had been in a hiatus before, but it was, I think, like what, 3, 4 months, and it came back. They came back, Um, it was odd that they randomly went into a hiatus, and it kept going on month after month after month. Eventually, comics stopped getting postponed, and we started seeing them get listed as canceled, which started getting people really concerned. That's when the concerns really started. Is when people started, like, it just started getting to a point where things got really bad. Like, it just seemed clear that something was not right. This didn't seem normal. Um, and as it progressed, we eventually Archie finally started acknowledging things. It's worth noting the word we got from the Sonic PR team about the comics being canceled was the very first time we actually got any full-fledged information about the situation. Other than that, all we would hear was, "We're in talks, we're in talks, we're in talks, we're in talks." Like, they said this for like 2, 3 months. We're in talks. This is all we knew. More information coming. We'll be in talk. We're in talks. That's it. Like I said, it wasn't full-fledged information like we would get with the Sonic PR statement today, but at the very least, it was something. But even then, It's like we just want to know what's going on because it's worth noting people are subscribed to this thing. This isn't like a game where you get a game, it turns out crap, or something happens and you just return it and you get full refund. You know, this is not the same. Like these are comics people were subscribed to, they were paying money for monthly, and they weren't being told the full information, and it just got absolutely stupid. The way this was handled was just, oh, like you can't tell. I'm burying my hands, like my face into my hands right now, just in sheer disgust about how this situation was handled, uh, and just how that paying customers were being kept in the dark about this. And it's still unknown if they're even going to get refunded for this. There's really no way of knowing. And I just can't get over how it had been handled and just how they weren't telling anyone anything. I mean, I get that it's one thing to be in talks, but when you're not at least giving us an indicator of like, you know, how people like subscribers will be handling the situation, how this would affect them, stuff like that. Like just giving like actually indicating that you're caring more about your subscribers. Like it didn't really come off that way. It just seemed like they kept everyone in the loop. And I know that there's legal stuff that they have to consider and NDAs, but I would assume that you can say more. Like I would hope that you could say more than just we're in talks. That doesn't really tell us anything. It just says you're in talks. Like, I would hope that Archie and Sega did a better job on addressing the situation because, like I said, people are paying for this. This isn't like I could understand with a game because at least it's a one-time thing, but this is a constant thing. And there are people who will probably still subscribe to the comics in the future too. It it's just uh I just don't understand. Like the more I think about it, the more I can't wrap my head around it. But anyway, I don't really understand why why it happened. But to continue the story, as I got off track there, just my mind is like, I think I share a lot of the opinions of the Sonic fans right now, where I say that we're all like we can't think right now because we're trying to wrap our heads around this mess that the comics became, mainly business politics wise. It's just absolutely mind-boggling to me. But continuing on with the story, there was eventually we finally got. We started seeing solicitations come up, and we still didn't see the Sonic comics return in any of them. They never did like come back in the solicitations. Then came the news from I think it was Ian Flynn like earlier this month that he heard that there may be some news coming out later this month, later in July. That was our first full-fledged indicator that something was actually going to happen. There was a situation with a subscriber email that Archie was going to send out, which by the way, I don't think that actually had been sent out. As far as I can recall off the top of my head, it it, it never really made sense, that things just didn't add up. And it just got to a point where people were actually starting to get angry. Like, even if Sega had announced that the comics were going to continue with Archie, I think the damage would have been done anyway. Because people were actually getting legitimately frustrated with how this had been handled, and I can't blame them. But eventually it got to a point where finally we got some kind of information about where things were going to go. Ian Flynn said we'd hear something, potentially hear something at the end of July, around later this month, based on what he was hearing. And then we got another update yesterday, as of this video's recording, we heard yesterday from the official Sonic PR team that we'd be hearing something about Archie later this week. Which I find strange because later this week ended up being just one day later. So I really don't think they should have said later this week. I think they should have just said tomorrow. Um, but despite that, they made the announcement today, and here we are. 6, 7 months later, after loads of confusion, frustration, and PR trouble, and everything, and it's just it ended up becoming that. Like it all came down to this. It really did. It all came down to this. This announcement that didn't even take but a minute to put up, like a few minutes to put up on Twitter and Facebook, and it took 6, 7 months to actually get out. And it's just, how long did it take? We were hearing rumors that things were not the talks, whether these talks were, they weren't going well at all. So it was pretty clear that they weren't getting anywhere. So the fact that it took this long really just makes things even more baffling. But I mean, I'm just gonna be very blunt. We all knew, like a lot of us had this inkling that it was gonna happen because just that way the headlines were, there was not a single headline we got that had been positive about this. Not a single one. And it was frustrating. It really was. I'm gonna be very blunt. I was not a fan of the comics. I didn't really care for them. It just wasn't my thing. I loved the Worlds Collide crossover, and I did love how expressive they made some of the characters, like Sonic and the expressions he's had, and there's that infamous, well, there's that famous reaction that Shadow had to Marine screwing things up at one point in one panel, and people just were absolutely thought that was just hilarious. Like they made some very meme-worthy panels, and you could tell that they cared about the fans, and they take and like the writers. You knew they did their homework and cared. And as I said before, the series had been going for like over 2 decades, and was rapidly approaching its 300th issue. This was going to be this year, and I think by now issue 300 would have been out if things had been on schedule. And it just never happened. I mean, I think it just things just seemed to be adding up and adding up. It was just lawsuit. Like there was the whole thing with Ken Penders, and then there was another lawsuit that happened with I think it was Matt Fulop Scott Fulop rather was his name. That one never. I thought it had come to an end, but as it turns out, it was just kind of in limbo, the whole case. Um, and it just feels like things just got more and more awkward as time went, and things like the weight of stress and legal problems and business problems that was like piling up with these comics. Just, I guess it got to a point where Sega just felt like we can't deal with this anymore, and they just pulled the plug. Do I fault Sega for canceling the comics? Not necessarily. I think I just, God, I don't even know where to start with this. Even after everything I said, I'm still at a loss, really, what to say, because there's really no, like I said, there's no reason for it to have come to this. But do I fault Sega? Really, I don't per se. I don't fault them for the lawsuits. It wasn't really their fault that the lawsuits happened. Um, maybe they should. It was more along the lines of what Archie was doing that kind of led to this happening. I feel like it was more so the actions of. It seemed like Archie was very reckless with how they handled these comics, especially in the last 5 years, 5, 10 years. Um, well, yeah, almost 10 years. Um, it never really. Well, no, it was 5 years. It was around 5 years, yeah. It never really, even after the lawsuits had finished, it never really seemed like the comics were coming to an end. Um, I never really thought that, you know, even just 7 months ago, none of us didn't really feel like the comics were going to be canceled. It seemed like they were still going strong 7 months ago, and it just got it, I just like the lawsuits didn't really hurt them. I don't think it really I don't think it really did Archie the comics in per se. It was just that was part of it, but I think it was just more along the lines of as a whole, with just how Archie was handling it, as a whole. And I don't know. It's just like it just felt like Archie just seemed to be growing more and more uninterested in it. They didn't really. It seemed like they cared less and less as we got closer to today, and I, I don't know the way to. I just don't. I don't know. It's just things became so damn complicated with this. It's just God. I just don't understand how complicated this got and what went wrong. What the hell went wrong? And I mean, and like I said, I know about like the lawsuit. I know that happened, but I don't feel like that alone did it in. It was just something that happened within the last 2 years, I think, or just the sheer fact that Sega just has gone through too much with this. Um, but I do feel like while the only thing I blame Sega for is clearly they were the ones that pulled the plug. I mean, Archie's I guess still wanted to keep things going despite all the crap that they had been messing up with, including contracts and the way that freelance writers handled their work within Archie, stuff like that. It just seemed like although they Archie was flawed, they still at least wanted to keep things going, you know. But Sega just didn't want to do it anymore, you know. They just felt like things had just gotten too toxic, too complicated, and they pulled the plug. I can't fault them for that. Obviously, they were the ones that pulled the plug, and I do think we should properly, if I do think we should properly, note that Archie was not the ones that wanted to end this. It was Sega. However, I think the way to put it is Archie sowed the seeds of the cancellation, and Sega just, you know, naturally responded to it. You know, it's. I feel like this was something that both sides are guilty on. It's really you can't really pin the blame on one, any singular entity. If you know what I mean. And that's just again just how complicated this crap has become. Where even just blaming someone is just impossible. I mean, I don't want an angry mob mentality. For the record, I don't want an angry mob mentality to be directed at anyone in particular because it really isn't anyone in particular that's to blame for this. Ken Penders is not to blame for this. Scott Fulop is not to blame for this. Archie is not to blame for this. Sega is not to blame for this. I feel like there's really like I said, there's no singular entity that's to blame for this. It feels like it was something that kind of came about by multiple parties involved. Some of which were related to Archie, some of which were related to Sega. Of course, I guess, of course, like I said, the lawsuits were also part of it, so you could, you know, Penders and Follop's names will inevitably pop up, but I really don't feel like an angry mob mentality should be start going after particular people. That's not fair because a lot of the writers did enjoy what they did, and they did enjoy their work for work for their for the comics and stuff, and it's just frustrating that this could have been handled so much better. Like clearly Archie didn't learn from anything. They may have been very enthusiastic about continuing the comics, but the business wise and legal wise they just couldn't freaking learn from their mistakes. And it's also worth noting, please don't blame Riverdale in it, like the Riverdale show and its cast. As much as I got really tired of hearing about that show, like months in when we were still wondering just what was going on with Sonic, the Sonic comics, they have nothing to do with the comics. You know, like the Riverdale show, although the people that produce the show are higher ups at Archie, the thing for me is, as I said, they had nothing to do with the fate of Sonic. This was not on Archie or its producers or its, cast. It has nothing to do with them. It was just an awkward timing and an very awkward coincidence that Riverdale came about and blew up as it did with Archie at the same time that just so happened that Sega just and Archie decided to get into talks and start not telling anyone anything, basically. And I mean, you could really just just tell that there's not a single Sonic fan that will be able to explain this to you in one paragraph. It's going to take multiple paragraphs to be able to give you a full story on how this came about, how things came up to this point. There's no way. I just single-handedly, I've done everything I could to think of a proper narrative to describe this, and it's just not possible. There's nothing you can say about these comics that isn't complicated. There's nothing complicated, like nothing simple anymore with how these comics have been handled, and it's frustrating. Like I said, I know I've been saying that a lot, but I don't know what else to say, really. I mean, there's so many things that could have been done right. So many things. And people are pissed. People are legitimately pissed at Archie for completely screwing over their, subscribers to these comics because people have been subscribed for these comics for years in some cases. And they were probably still subscribed at the time that these comics, they were probably still subscribed at the time that these comics have been put on hiatus and stuff. It really did get to a point where people were starting to just be like, yeah, I want nothing to do with Archie anymore. That's how bad things got. People were starting to just boycott Archie. Um, and as I said, I can't blame them because Archie really did not handle this well. Whereas you didn't really like their subscribers had been left in the dark. They've been pushed aside. And although I mean, it's like I said, I can't fault them for can't like I said, I can't fault Riverdale's staff. It seemed like Archie's PR really did just you could tell where the priority was in regards to like in comparison to Sonic. Now, not necessarily saying it's their fault because they have to talk about stuff, including their own products and promote them and get them out there, but the fact that they just kept leaving other people hanging like that, they didn't actually account for some people, just kept ignoring them for so long. And then when they finally started responding, it was just the very like artificial PR talk is I think the best way to explain it. So you can tell they were just saying that because of NDA. They weren't really saying that because they wanted to per se. It was more so like the NDA was only allowing them to do this. Um, and I guess they got tired of the amount of people responding to them about the matter. I don't know. Like I I don't know. I just don't know. And I don't think we'll ever know for sure what exactly went wrong. Um, we might get we there's gonna be speculation. There's already speculation. People are pointing fingers at different areas, different people, different companies, and it's just this is easily. I'm gonna be very blunt about this. This is easily since the the biggest amount of mismanagement and screw ups and just business like legal crap and this was the biggest mess in my opinion that has ensued since the Sega Saturn days. And I say this because as bad as Sonic 06 was, as bad as Rise of Lyric was, they didn't ruin Sonic. They didn't completely destroy. They weren't the end of an entire branch of Sonic. Those were games that got negated by good games. They uh, like Generations and Colors and the classic trilogy, and you know, arguably for many fans, they feel those adventure games as well. There were so many things that what wrong with those six in Rise of Lyric, yes, but they didn't destroy a branch of Sonic. And you could say, well, Rise of Lyric destroyed the Boom Branch. Yes and no. Well, yes, it did destroy the Boom games. The cartoon is still going. It didn't kill the Boom Branch per se. Um, that said, the thing for me is that this was just so bad, but poorly done, and it's again worth noting. This isn't just something that was just you know a reboot, or which reminds me, I forgot they did a reboot, by the way, in the past 5 years as well. Another thing that you could add to the complications that this comic has had was the massive reboot that they had to give the comic Archie Sonic universe, uh, after I think the Penders lawsuit, I believe. Um, but it really did get to a point that it felt like this was not something that was normal. It's not something that could be. This is going to be a permanent change. This isn't something that is going to be rectified easily. All these characters you see on this screen, like you see Sally, you see Bunny, you see like all these characters that the freedom fighters stuff. We may never see them again. That's another thing that upsets people about this, is that we don't know what's going to be this quote unquote new direction they're taking with the comics. Even though we know that they are not going to be stopping Sonic being in comics as a whole, the fact of the matter is the way we've seen, the way we perceive the comics, Sonic comics, is going to be so radically different. The way things are going, that I just don't see that any of this is going to be the same. Like I said, Sally, I'd be shocked if the Freedom Fighters came back. And it's not just because of the fact that I hate the Freedom Fighter. No, I'm saying this because from a business standpoint, a legal standpoint, and I guess political standpoint, business political, the inner politics and business and stuff like that, there's just no way that Sega's going to want to keep these characters going. Um, they seem to be as the comics went on, they seem to be making the comics more and more in line with the games, more in game like games identical to the games. They made a lot more game adaptations as of late, and it just seemed like they wanted to bring the comics more like less of its own uh, entity and more in line, like I said, the games. And this new direction gives me a feeling that they're going to be going even more down that route. So we may not even see the Freedom Fighters anymore. We may not see a lot of these characters that we had been seeing throughout the history of Archie Sonic is probably going to be gone. Um, and I'm not saying that. Like, to be fair, this is speculation, but this just seems to be based on the way the comics have been going up to this point, and just how things have been handled. Uh, like nothing really seems to suggest that they're going to keep these characters, and just the fact that the characters alone became a toxic, you know, legal crap fest because of the lawsuits. I feel like Sega's going to want to play it safe with characters, like new characters in the comics and stuff like that. I just don't see them sticking with the comics in this way anymore. Will we see a new publisher? I think there will be a new publisher. I think there will be a new Sonic comic publisher in some way. They may get some fans on for it. I don't know. Beats me, but it it really does seem to me like this is the end of an end of a huge era, because this was a roughly 2.5 decade long road. Like these comics have gone for ages. Like I said, there were nearly 300 issues that came out, and not many adaptation, video gaming comics have that can claim that, you know. Um, and in fact, I think it had the record of being the longest running comic series. I believe, like continuous. Anyway, I don't know for sure. I don't know that for sure, but it did have its length. Actually, did become a, you know, it became noteworthy, and it just, God, it was just. I don't know what to say. I really don't. I feel so bad for the freelance writers that were just half a year ago were had a job like a this job that they could do to get paid money for, and now suddenly they don't have this anymore to fall back on. You know, I feel bad for the fans that had been subscribed to this comic that suddenly they don't have. Who knows if they're going to be getting refunds at all. And but most of all, I feel bad for the people that like these comics. You know, for a lot of people, it felt like that this was the high point of Sonic story writing, and now that's no longer a thing. And for the people who didn't like the story writing of the Sonic games, those they had at least the comics to fall back on to enjoy Sonic. Now they don't have that anymore. I'd be frustrated if I didn't like the Sonic game writing, and but I love this Archie Sonic writing. I'd be upset. I wouldn't be, you know, cool with this. I won't lie, you know. I'd be pissed because, as I said, this was a high marking point of it's a high point. Whoop! I almost accidentally hit the button on my mic. It was a high point in Sonic for a lot of people. This was Sonic to them, and now that no longer exists. So what do they have now? You know, there was it just didn't need to come to this. And now a bunch of fans no longer have a venue to turn to for Sonic. I mean, like I said, for them, Archie Sonic meant everything. You know, that was Sonic to them. That was what Sonic should be. Sonic should represent. And they had wished that this had carried over into the games. Like they wanted people like Ian Flynn to write for the games. They were lucky to get Ian Flynn writing for a couple of Boom episodes, you know, for the cartoon, but they never really got to see Sonic, like Archie Sonic's influence in the games, like people wanted, and like I don't know. It's just I just feel so bad that people have just been screwed over right now. It's just been so many people screwed over by this. And it stinks. It really, really stinks. There are loads and loads of people who worked on the comics that no longer have that. A lot of people who subscribe to the comics who no longer have that and now don't even know if they're going to get a refund. People don't know if they're going to get like there's so many concerns right now. And the future of Sonic and comics as a whole, it looks so much in question right now that it's just hard to handle. I mean, I am never going to be able to come to terms with this entire situation because it's just how poorly it was handled. The only thing that came close to me as of late is how the Boom cartoon has been handled, and even then, that was mainly like Cartoon Network. You know, it didn't get as it wasn't as complicated and legally troubling as it was with the Archie comics, and it's just frustrating. It's just so damn frustrating. I don't understand what went wrong. Ugh. But anyway, I think I've dwelt on this long enough. I think it's been like what 30, 40 minutes maybe. I don't know. I lost track. I lost track of the comics as a whole anyway, with how much had been going on with them. So, But anyway, if you guys have been following the entire situation on TSSE, thank you all for, you know, sticking by us through our coverage of this entire Archie Sonic ordeal. That has been happening the last half a year. It's been rough. It's been very rough having to. No one ever wants to give bad news out. Every time I had to write about the solicitations not happening in that month, people dropping the word cancellation. Um, there was an Archie Sonic freelance writer that actually said the word canceled a week or two ago, and you had that, and it just stinks when you have to relay bad news. This was news I did not like to share. It because I knew how much the Archie Sonic comics meant to people. People grew up with these comics in some cases. It would be like if the Sonic games suddenly stopped. The Sonic games mean a lot to so many people. That'd just be hard to fathom that they would be suddenly done. And now you have the Archie Sonic comics done. I mean, I may be overblowing this, but I really can't I can't stress enough how much these comics had actually meant to Sonic fans. And there were thousands of people that were subscribed to these comics. Um, but the sad truth is that they're done. Like the Archie Sonic universe is done. Um, so like I said, we'll find out more about what this new direction will be in the future. But it's hard to say right now. It's really, really hard to say because we don't know what this direction is going to be. We don't know exactly what's coming, what's going. We don't know anything. But if anything, the fact that they said this, like it really, I can't stress enough just how much of a situation this is right now for Sonic and this branch of Sonic, and it stinks. It really does. Um, you can you can really just you can go online and just read up all the this like the disappointment people have about this happening. Especially considering, like I said, this never should have happened. It never should have come to this. But like I said, I've dwelled on long enough about this, and I've repeated myself I don't know how many times throughout this, but so I apologize. I just, it. I just don't know what I'm at a loss for words, really. Even though I knew that I had an inkling that this would happen, just the fact that it happened at all, you know, it stinks. It really does. This all stinks so much, But the good news is that now, going forward, hopefully things will get less complicated. Hopefully there will be no longer any legal issues associated with like any Sonic comic projects later on. Um, no more complications. Hopefully things will be more smooth sailing, for this branch of Sonic. But we shall see. Again, thank you to those of you who have been following the coverage we've been having about this matter on TCC for the last 6, 7 months. It's been, like I said, it's been awkward having to get this information out to you guys, considering, like I said, I know how much this means to quite a few of you. But comes part of the job. You have to relay news, both good and bad, and this isn't good news. So, but we shall see how things go. But for now, thank you guys for listening to this whole thing, and take care, guys.